We've all heard about it, probably even seen it for ourselves. English, or bad English in Asia. Let's talk about it. So it's one of those things that I've been thinking about and wondering ever since I moved to Japan. After all, I did come initially on a Japanese government program, and one of its aims was to improve the level of Japanese people's English. I was being paid with taxpayers' money, and it's a pretty big initiative. So I was wondering, are we seeing any results? Now, before I get into it, let me just state the obvious that Japan is not an English-speaking country, so it's kind of absurd for us to expect there to be great English everywhere. Now, should they improve their English? I mean, probably, but it's not really for us to say or impose. Now, it's easy to see why a small business or, a family-run izakaya or something would have poor English. They have less people, less resources, probably less capability in foreign languages, and a lot of things, especially for izakayas, are not really translatable. So of course, smaller businesses, they should get a pass, but my question was, why do even big companies or corporations struggle with their English? They have a lot more talent, a lot more resources and staff, bigger budgets. The government is pushing to become more international, attract more foreign tourists. There was the Olympics that were supposed to happen. So why? So I work in marketing at a Japanese creative agency here in Tokyo, and most of our clients are Japanese companies. So I do have a few thoughts and theories as to why a lot of these companies struggle with their English output. Before I get into that, I just wanted to share a few campaigns and few examples of English or stuff that didn't really translate that stuck with me over the past few years. This one is by Docomo. Docomo is a major telecommunications company here in Japan. They are the biggest mobile service provider in the country. Their campaign for their D-Point point card, it was featuring actress Ayami Nakajo, and their slogan was, "Have a nice D."
3本がパーいくでパー3パーや3パー何それ D カードならマクドナルドで 3% off Have a nice D.
Now, it sounds pretty innocent if you don't really know the modern terminology or modern meanings of certain words and letters in English, but anyone who is in touch with how English is as far as the current day goes knows that D can mean dick. So it sounds, playfully dirty.
Have a nice D.
This one is by Ebisu Beer. They are owned by the oldest brewery in Japan, Sapporo, and it was for their new beer line. It featured actress Kyoko Fukada, and the slogan was, "I'm fruity."
時ご褒美あげないと心がどんどん乾いてしまう I'm fruity.
The beer was actually a little bit fruity, and so it would make sense if you're saying that, it's fruity. But she is saying, "I'm fruity," and it's just, when we call people fruity, it's usually not in the most positive light. So, it's kind of strange. This one was by Musée Platinum. They are a hair removal salon that has almost 200 locations throughout Japan. This one was particularly bad. Their slogan was, "Enjoy the girl." So obviously, you know that is not an appropriate thing to say. "Enjoy the girl" kind of objectifies women, and it was prematurely launched all over the place. It made headlines in English media. It was, every time you boarded the train, it was "Enjoy the girl, enjoy the girl, enjoy the girl." So that was a huge mistake on their part. So they immediately took it down and replaced it with "enjoy, girls." Now this is just a few examples. There are a whole lot more that people are sharing online all the time. But why does this actually happen still? One is that English is used for styling. It is just like a graphic or an emoji used in order to get across a certain feeling or a certain emotion. That is what English is in Japan. It's not meant to get across real deep information. As long as there's Japanese in there, it's fine. The English is just meant to look cool or to present a certain image. It's very similar to how people out west might get a tattoo in Chinese kanji or something. It's basically the same idea. So being a native English speaker working at a Japanese company, you automatically become the go-to resource for anything English and Western or foreign related. And so I have been asked about English copywriting and pretty much tasked with coming up with English copy. I'm not a copywriter, but it helps to give me some insight as to why this might happen. So in these English copy requests by Japanese companies, there are two general themes. One is that it has to be sophisticated, sound cool, present a good image. And then two is that it has to be easy enough for the typical Japanese person to understand. Those two things are really in conflict with each other because Japanese is the primary language here and Japanese people's average English ability is very low. So there is almost no way that you can come up with really good English copy, but also have it be very understandable in the domestic market. And so that is why you end up with a lot of words like love, happy, enjoy. These are very positive words and they help get across the feeling or emotion to a lot more people because it's easily understood. These companies are not trying to reach foreigners, they are trying to reach Japanese people. So that is going to be the priority. And for them to allocate a budget to getting really cool English or getting something that works a little bit better, it's just not on their list of priorities to do. So the second thing is katakana English confusion. Katakana is one of the alphabets in Japanese language and it's often used for foreign words translated into Japanese. And what happens is that a lot of these words will get shortened to help people remember or pronounce better and make it easier just in general. And once that happens, that word doesn't really change. It doesn't change tense or meaning if that English word has more than one meaning. And another thing is that a lot of times there are actually Japanese words for something, but recently younger people tend to use the katakana word for it. For example, department store. There is a Japanese word for it, but a lot of people will just say depato. Depato is short for depart. And what happens is that it might make sense to say depart in Japanese and people think, oh, department store. But the word depart itself has a completely different meaning in English. So when someone is switching back between English and the katakana loan word in Japanese, it can be a little bit confusing. An example of the tense not changing is that the word get is often used in Japan, but it's never changed to got. So there is no tense change. And there's also a lot of words that are kind of made up. Like, for example, to get something quickly or to be the first to get a new release or something, you can say flying get. We don't have that phrase flying get, but they're using foreign words to create a new Japanese word out of those foreign words, if that makes sense. One really good example of words not adapting to changes in meaning overseas is McDonald's. McDonald's Japan last year released a new pie called Otona Cream Pie, and it kind of got a lot of buzz on the internet because it translates to adult cream pie. Now, it's actually a cream pie, but we all know that that is not what it really means anymore. And then the visual and everything, it just was kind of funny. And I'm actually kind of curious as to why or how that even happened, because I know McDonald's Japan has like 4 agencies working in their marketing, and they have foreigner resources and English-speaking resources. So I'm really wondering what the story was as far as like why that even happened. If anybody watching works at one of these companies or knows the story, like please share it. I'm super interested. So third reason is just limited resources and barriers separating different teams within the organization as well as between organizations that they outsource to. So what I've come to realize is that a lot of Japanese companies, especially traditional Japanese companies, don't do their own marketing and advertising and promotions. Not even the basic stuff. Like they'll outsource just to run Google ads or something like that. And so what happens is that there's a lot of barriers that are in between different teams. Even internally, for example, I went to a meeting with a Japanese company about a certain project, only to come to find out that another team within that company met with another team within our company about the same project. And it's just like, like there's no communication like, hey, we're going to meet this company. And, so there's a lot of communication barriers, and more traditional companies here in Japan will often rotate people to different departments over their career. So, this can be a situation that is facing a lot of companies where they don't have the resources, but also don't have the ability to communicate internally or externally at an efficient level enough to make sure that everything that is being put out, especially in English, is of good quality. So like when these companies outsource a task, for example, like a 1-page LP for the campaign, and they want English, a lot of times these companies are smaller, they are Japanese, they are not able to come up with very good copywriting in English, and they don't have the budget to get that done either. And then there's just pride and stubbornness, and it is often related to Japanese work culture. Age is one of the big variables when determining promotions. So you may have, a manager who is 60-something years old, who was rotated around to different departments over his career and may not have a super deep grasp on what they're actually overseeing. An example of this is the Minister of Cybersecurity in the Japanese government, who made the news because he doesn't use computers. And because age is a very important variable in the office, even though that older manager may not understand what they're doing, nobody who's younger is really going to be like, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, because there is that ingrained automatic respect that they must have for their elders and superiors. So you may not have the best output coming out if the person in charge doesn't really understand what's going on. Or it could be one of the regular staff members who have been put in charge of this English task, and they might be the best option that that company has to be in charge of the English copy, or they were rotated into that role, did not actually want to do it or are not capable of it, but they need to be able to do it because it's their job. And so an example was that I was tasked at my agency to write English copy for a website, and we had to get a check, but who was checking my English? Now, I was not perfect, but the person checking my English was at a lower English level than me. And so when I got the checks back and I looked at it, and they put their changes that they wanted to have made, and I was reading it and I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. Like it doesn't make sense in English. And so I had to rewrite everything again, and it's just that whole process is just really tedious. And so it's easy to see, for me at least, why the final outcome might not be good or even understandable for an English speaker. So that's where we're at today. It's still a challenge for Japanese companies to put out good English and avoid that English mistakes. Do I think that they should put a little bit more emphasis or make it a little bit more of a priority to make sure their English is okay? Yes, I do, because it can be easily interpreted in a different way or even be offensive. And especially with social media being the dominant form of communication today, something that can be intended for a domestic audience can easily be seen and heard overseas, and it might, lead to negative backlash. So I do think that it should be checked. So what do you think? Do you think companies really need to prioritize how good their foreign language is, or do you think it should be just done to the best of their abilities and whatever happens? Let me know in the comments below, and also feel free to share any strange English stories or anything like that in the comments as well. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I really appreciate that, and I hope to see you in the next one.